Good morning. You listen to the Blaine's World show, heard each Wednesday morning here on the new WPVM in LP in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in the Asheville area. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest, Jeff Messer.
Hey, Blaine. How you doing?
Good, Jeff. Welcome aboard. And Jeff, I should mention, is co-author of the show right now at Montford, Robin Hood Quest for Justice. And Jeff, by the way, you might want to also wave to many fans and friends on Facebook.
Many, many fans.
Okay.
There we go. And many more today, right? We'll get more.
And hopefully Kelly is watching this morning.
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay, no idea. Well, Cynthia never watches.
Yes,
so
that's right. That's right.
They can
the support.
Okay, the support. Anyway, Jeff, let's talk. I don't even know where to begin with you, Jeff, because Jeff is, as you'll see, a man of many talents and abilities. And right now, it seems, Jeff, you're doing about 17 things at once.
Well, there's a there's a bad habit that is instilled in you when you're a young actor, when you're in college and you're studying to be an actor, a performer, entertainer, and that sort of thing, is they teach you to never say no. You know, if someone says, hey, it's an acting job, you've got an acting job coming up, and if they ask you if you can juggle, say yes. If they ask you if you can ride a horse, you say yes, because chances are you have maybe 24 hours before you're called to the set or you're due whatever gig you're doing. You can learn something in 24 hours.
By the way, can you juggle?
Yes.
Have you learned to juggle?
Yes, I did. I did in college for an audition, just for an audition. I was just doing a monologue, and there was a bit in it, and it was a monologue that I pulled myself from an episode of the classic TV show MASH, because I was always looking for creative monologues that didn't really pop up as the usual monologues, because that was one of the tricks there. And I used to write my own plays when I was younger, and I would audition with monologues from my own shows. And if you go to an audition and you do something they've never heard and it's entertaining, they'll stop you afterwards and go, hey, what was it from? And then you tell them, and they're like, oh, really, really? Tell me more about what you're writing and all this. So you get more face time with them, as opposed to doing, Willie Loman or Shakespeare or something, typical that they've heard a million times. You do something that they haven't. So I learned how to juggle just for this one monologue and audition because I wanted it to be memorable.
Well, now the truth, Jeff, too, comes out. The other advantage to that is you don't have to memorize the dialogue, because if you wrote it...
Well, sometimes, though, I'm very cruel to myself as a playwright, because I will continue to rewrite as I go. And I've only a few times been on stage in shows that I've written, and one in particular 15, 16 years ago or so. Afterwards, after the run of the show, the director of the show came up to me and said, well, you've continued to write a better play throughout this entire process. So,
How many plays have you written?
It's approaching 30 at this point, high 20s. I used to keep account. I used to do one a year was my hard, fast rules. I would write a new play per year, and it's gotten harder in recent years because I have several projects going at once. So I have 3 or 4 scripts that are partially written. I have several. There's several more Robin Hood scripts that are in various states of completion. So it's harder to keep track of, because as time becomes more precious, the older you get, I work on something as much as I can, and if I run out of steam, I'll instead of letting that writer's block set in, I'll put it to the side and I'll pick up something else and reread something else and go, oh, now I've got a great idea for this, and then I'll write on that for a week or two.
Talk about that process, though, in terms of doing several things at once. When you are, do you tend to just focus on one thing, or you'll be doing a bunch of things at once?
It's a bunch of things at once, and I don't know if that's the right way to be successful. Is to be doing too many, back to MASH, the Charles Emerson Winchester approach. I do one thing at a time, I do it very well, and then I move on. I don't necessarily prescribe to that notion, so I tend to have, I said a few years ago, and I like to use this as a reference, picture, if you will, my life is a 10-burner stovetop, one of these big industrial things. And there are 9 pots on 9 of the burners at various states of boil. And I have 1 stirring spoon. And the only reason there's not a 10th pot is that I'm waiting for the right thing to come along.
Interesting.
So
Great analogy.
That's
Yes,
That's how I approach
my
life.
father was sort of like that too, that he would just do one thing, and I would do like 10 things.
Right,
I have
right.
to remember that. That's a
Yeah.
great analogy. Because another thing you do too, and I think you do it very well, is you also do things in a collaborative nature. In other words, even though you do a lot of stuff just by yourself,
Yeah.
you also seem to team up with
I
different
like
people.
you have to. I think it's an ego check. I think if you're a writer, especially, and you just focus on doing your own thing, it becomes very self-indulgent, and your ego can get out of control really quickly. And I've seen it before, and I've experienced it myself a little bit, where you kind of go, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm the complete arbiter of my universe, and that's it. But when you work with other people, you have to navigate their sensibilities, their personalities, and you have to find the right thing to collaborate with people on. And it was funny, I was thinking about this the other day. I've collaborated with a couple of different people consistently over the years, and I thought, well, it would be interesting if if like any combination of the three of us got together. And then I was like, nope, because the other two guys wouldn't be a good collaboration.
Because
But I can be with each of them individually.
Because again, back to you, I know you've also done some individual stuff, like your plays.
Yes.
I've seen some of them you've written just by yourself.
Sure, yeah.
But some you've written, like Rob
With
Akers, and we'll
others,
tell
yeah.
others about that in a second. But do you have a preference as to if you're writing a play, for example? Do you have a preference as to writing it by yourself or with somebody else?
It depends on the project, honestly. And the other person is an accountability factor. And if you're doing something big, like a Robin Hood, which is pretty massive, there are a lot of moving parts that it's hard for one person to really keep track of, per se. And even with two people, you miss things. We would go back and reread something and go, oh my gosh, how did we miss that in the show? Because there's just so many things that are going on there. I do like, because I just am constantly in a creative mode. I'm always creating. I'm always working on something. To me, it's relaxing. My wife is very funny. Sometimes she has insomnia and can't sleep and so forth, and I'll go to sleep and just never move the whole night. I'm in one spot, and she asked me one time, it's like, how do you do that? How is it that you're able to do that? And I'm like, oh, just I even when I'm thinking about stuff, she's like, if I start thinking about things, I just stay awake. And I'm like, no, the most relaxing thing in the world for me is I'll go back and start picking up and reviewing scripts in my head. Right, where am I with this? What's the story? And I'll start sort of, not really editing, I guess, but I'll start working through what I've already done, and it lulls me to sleep like counting sheep.
Very interesting.
It's the most relaxing thing in the world is to be creative.
My reaction is sort of similar to Kelly's, that I go through my mind so many things, and I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and just start working on them.
It's tough because you have to, and this process doesn't work for everybody, obviously, but for me, a lot of it is just letting it kind of percolate, perpetual percolation. And I don't know that this is true, because I don't know that people say, there's no such thing as multitasking. You can't be thinking about 3 things at once while doing something else. I don't know that I believe that that's true, because I'd like to feel that somewhere in my head, in these little pockets in my brain, all 5 or 6 projects that I have going are being worked on, even if I'm not consciously assessing them.
I've heard that theory too, just concentrate on one thing at a time. Yet, every so often, I'll try to see if I can do like 4 things at once. And I just think that's cool. I'll be exercising, watching TV, eating, speaking to somebody on the phone.
Right. Well, juggling disproves this theory, because if you can do a monologue and juggle at the same time, you're multitasking.
Very good point.
Yeah. Guitar players, musicians, they multitask all the time.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Talk also about the I don't know if you've written other books, but the one book I read a couple of years ago, I really liked it. Was that the first book you'd written?
Oh, the political satire.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, it was. It was the first. I was in radio for about 5 years with iHeartRadio, doing a talk show, a political talk show, and the idea dawned on me, and I knew a publisher, and I just sort of mentioned it to him. I said, my journey in radio and my humorous approach to things might make an interesting book. And so thus was born the book Red State, White Guy Blues, which is, a play on words, but also a definition of me and where I live. I'm a white guy, feeling the blues in a red state.
You're a white guy? I didn't know that.
I try to keep it on the down low as much as humanly possible. because apparently, if you look at the history of the human race, we white men have been the bane of everyone's existence.
I want to put you on the spot, though,
Okay.
to talk about that book. So I'm still waiting for the second one. Remember, you were
did start working on a second one, and I did have I had a good chunk of it written and a good portion of it. You know, it was weird because doing the radio thing, I would blog and I would have a daily kind of record of what was going on, and so I would pull extensively from that. And I tell you, the first book took place roughly followed between 2012 and 2014, so the 2-year political cycle up to that 2014 midterm election. And dealing with North Carolina, the politics were kind of interesting in the early 20-teens. And so I thought, oh, this is great. I can every other year I can put out a book that lands or ends on the election at November of that cycle. So much so that the first book, which came out in mid-November, I wrote the last pages of after midnight on election night 2014 and sent them hurriedly to the editor so he could slap them into the book and send it to the printers. And I thought, I could do this. This would be a good way to kind of keep tabs, and I could do this every couple of years, and it can be a lot of fun. And in 2016, I thought, okay, there's a natural ending for this book because there's going to be a giant presidential election, and it's going to be, historic. I mean, it ended up being historic, but for different reasons than a lot of people presumed it would be. And I thought this will be great because the natural ending is the speechifying on election night. Well, I don't know if people remember or have been paying attention, but the election night of 2016 was not the end of any story. It was the beginning of a big, giant what next and what the F, kind of story. And people sitting there going, wow, this is not this is the beginning of who knows what. This is uncharted territory. This is unexplored space. And it was a quandary for me because I was like, the ending of my book just got taken away because everything that happens after is infinitely more interesting than the lead up to it. And nobody's going to want to read a book that is front-loading an ending that doesn't happen.
Well, it's like points well taken in that I was just looking at Amazon even recently, and there must have been like 2,700 books, not 2,700, but a lot of books written on the election
Sure.
and the process of election, and I have no interest in them anymore because
Right.
what's happened since
Yeah.
is more interesting.
Yeah. That turn of the page it basically killed my second book because I would have had to have scrapped everything and just started over. And there was a point where I didn't have the willpower to do it. And instead, what I did 5 of these. I went and did at the Magnetic Theater a stand-up show called Maintaining an Election, which was me doing political comedy. And the first one was on April the 1st, 2017,
Perfect
about
date.
6 weeks after the inauguration. And that's how I kind of worked it out.
Did you enjoy that?
I did. I really did. The first one was oddly magical. It was terrifying. Doing stand-up comedy is not easy. But I also it was like late night TV. So I had an opening monologue and then I had an interview guest and did all those sorts of things. And the opening monologue was about 20 minutes of me doing stand-up. And I had never done it before. And apparently did it so well on that first night. I don't remember. It's like having this blackout thing where I remember that people laughed, but I can't remember any moment of it because it was so out of body for me. And somewhere there's video footage of it, which may release itself into the world at some point, maybe after the 2020 election. We'll see. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a challenge that I'd never presented to myself before, and I thought, well, why not? I have funny things to say that I can't say on the radio in a much more adult-oriented world, because if you're talking about the current president, there's a lot of very pornographic things that go along with who he is that are hard to talk about. I mean, we've seen, him calling African countries a certain term, and suddenly the news media going, can we say that? It's like we're quoting the president, and is the FCC going to be okay with us saying that? And it's a brave new world.
Do you have a preference as to the theater, what you like doing? In other words, I've seen you as an actor. I've enjoyed seeing you as an actor. I've seen you as a director, too.
Yes.
Do you have a preference as to what you like doing?
Whichever one I'm doing at the moment. And that's such a cheat to say, but I had an acting experience earlier this year playing a small role in a show at the theater in Waynesville in their studio, and it was liberating. It was like, wow, I could do this all day.
Which show was that?
It was called Dead Man's Cell Phone.
Okay, yeah, a crazy kind of play, but
Yeah.
uh,
It was a lot of fun, and as an actor, it was like, wow, this is, and it had me picking up scripts and reading them and going, I want to do this and I want to do this, and then I directed the Foreigner, a play called The Foreigner over there, and I also directed a play called Red about Mark Rothko, the painter, which is coming back.
I saw it,
It's
yeah.
performing in Marshall at a tiny art space out there, and then is going to perform at the Attic Salt Theater here in Asheville in August.
very
And
powerful
so
play. Well done, too.
It was a great thing to work on for sure. And so when I'm directing, it's like, oh, it's this, you're the god of the universe as a director. You have, control of everything, and you're kind of deciding everything. And as an actor, you just get to kind of kick back and go, I got one thing to do. And if I do it very well, I can move on. No, it's, whichever one I'm doing at the time. And it's great to flip back and forth between them because you don't get burned out.
How about directing your own play? In other words, I remember a couple of years ago, and it really surprised me, at Hendersonville.
Yes.
I saw a play you had written many years ago.
Right.
But I thought it was really good. How was that experience?
It was good. It was, that show was a romantic comedy I wrote in the late 90s when I was in my 20s, and they did it. It sold out its entire run, added performances, really was hugely popular. It struck a chord, I guess, with the actors and with the community there. I'd prefer not to direct my own stuff. That can be somewhat dangerous. And I have a real problem with playwrights who have this, every word is precious. This tension that they have over, that's not how I wrote it, to say it that way. And then that becomes too much of there's too much negativity there. So I told this cast the very first read-through, I said, I wrote this play 20 years ago. I only reread it 2 months ago. And in rehearsal, because I'm directing it, which wasn't a choice of mine necessarily, but that's just kind of the way that worked out. And I said, the stage manager is on book, and if you need to call lines, she'll help you. But I am not going to look at the script ever. And so if you say something different than is written, and it's better than what's written, I'm never going to know. Because my goal, and working with collaborators, this is the way I feel too, is that playwriting is a solitary thing. Producing a show is a team effort. And if somebody finds a way of saying what is needing to be said better, if an actor is like, oh, that just doesn't trip off my tongue the right way, but they say it differently, but it's just as good of a line, go for that. Because the goal here is to make the best product possible, to entertain an audience. And we, writers and directors and sometimes actors lose sight of their audience, and it becomes too self-indulgent. And so my thing has always been, whatever it takes to make this the best thing possible, that's what we'll do.
I've always wondered with a playwright, as you write the play or as you finish it, do you read it out aloud or do you have somebody else read it out aloud?
Not necessarily. I mean, if I'm working with a collaborator, we bounce dialogue back and forth. Oh, this would be a good line. Oh, this would be a good line. And then after after we write a few pages, you go back and kind of reread it. And if you work with enough actors as I have, and I know plenty of people, I'm like, who could I cast in this? If I had to cast the show, who have I got? Or in the case of Robin Hood, we're doing the second Robin Hood adventure this summer. So we had actors who were in the roles last summer. And so you write going, okay, I know who I've got. How do they look and sound saying this in a certain way? And so you put the voices to it and you read it to yourself, or you look at the lines and go, okay, that doesn't feel like it hits just right. Let me tweak it a little bit to make it feel more natural. So
We'll talk a little bit then about Robin Hood, since we mentioned it, and it's right now playing at Montford for how many weeks?
4 more weekends. It's a 5-weekend
Wow.
run, just like it was last year. Last year's Robin Hood, The Legend of Sherwood, was the beginning of the Robin Hood legend. Quest for Justice is more adventures in the Robin Hood universe. You don't have to have seen the first one to get the second one, but if you do, it's bonus points for you. They're both standalone, but they also connect into a larger story. And last summer, we performed to about 6,600 people in 5 weeks. Broke every record that Montfort has ever had in its 47 years in its existence. For attendance, for donations, for everything you can think of.
So talk about Robin Hood. It's not two. It's what's the name
Quest
of it?
for Justice.
And so you also, after this one, there are going to be 3 more?
Well, it's a little weird. There are two more scripts, one of which is fully written, and the other one is about half written. Robert Akers and I, when we started this process, we thought it wouldn't be interesting to tell the entire legend from beginning to end. And we had written ideally for 3 plays first, and then we broke it up and did 2 early adventures with a 15-year time jump, and then the 2 later adventures. So the 3rd and 4th scripts in the Ultimate Saga are 15 years later and play heavily into the period of the Magna Carta and what was going on historically. So there's a little more historical bent to the later plays, but it ends with the classic Robin Hood ending. Spoilers, he dies. He dies heroically, but he dies. If anybody's been around the legend for how many centuries it's been, 800 years or so, that's how the story ends. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do right, be complete, to be the only people to sort of tell this complete tale. And as such, when you get that creative juice flowing, we kind of went back. It's like, so what happened before? And so we've got 2 ideas for scripts that happened before dealing with him. And then we've also adapted at the request of a theater that had produced the show 9 years ago. They asked, do you have any young, youth-oriented scripts that we could use? And so Robert and I got together over a weekend and wrote 2 one-acts that are the adventures of young Robin Hood as a teenager.
Parkway's going to do that? Or who's going to do that?
Nobody's set to do it yet, but it was done in Ohio a couple of years ago at a theater that produced the Robin Hood show, Legend of Sherwood, and it became the most successful show they'd ever done as a theater. And so they were like, hey, you got more of these? And it's funny because everybody's always like, hey, you got more of these? But when they first see it, they're like, whoo, that's a big cast, and you're just sword fighting, and you're firing arrows, and you're doing all this stuff. It's like, the theaters get nervous, and then we're like, trust us. And then they produce it, and they're like, holy crap, you got more? So it's one of those double-edged swords, if you will.
Reminds me, you're talking about Robin Hood get older, and you have me looking forward to 3 and 4. You ever see the film Robin and Marian?
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite films.
It's one of the best Robin Hood stories out there.
I thought so. It's just such a sweet film.
Yeah.
But who would think Robin Hood get old? You don't think Robin Hood get old.
Latter days Robin Hood, yes.
And why I'm anxious to see the current one is I guess you have a challenge with any show. I thought you had a perfect Robin Hood the first time around.
Yes.
I thought he was brilliant.
Yes.
But you have another Robin Hood this time. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Who's Robin Hood this time?
It's an actor I've known for a number of years, and when we offered anybody who was in the show last year the opportunity to come back. Some did and some didn't, based on, a year's a long time. Life's change, schedules change, conflicts arise, and all of those sorts of things. And so when Ryan, the guy that played Robin Hood last year, was unavailable to do it this year, the first thing that happens is you panic.
Right.
You're like, oh my God, because he was a charm factory. He was fantastic.
He was great. Yeah.
And and the director Michael Lilly was kind of it's like what are we gonna do? And I'm like, hang on, let me think. And I got a ringer, and so I called up Miles Rice, and I met him and plied him with a little bit of local brew and said, hey, would you be interested in coming over and doing this? I think this is a good role for you. You're going to be astonished at the community response to this. And he came on board, and he said yes. And different, but equally charming. In fact, nothing against anybody who was in the show last year, but I have heard people who saw this show last weekend say, we saw it last year, we like this cast better. And that's not me, that's the audience.
And I can't believe it because I really enjoyed it last year. I'm not just saying because you're on the opposite side of Mike here, but it's just a great show. It's like romantic, dashing, fun.
It's entertainment.
Right. And it was.
Which a lot of people lose sight of, and
Good
a lot
point.
of theaters lose sight of. You're here to entertain an audience. And when you give them something that is pure entertainment, and it can have message to it, it can have some weight and substance to it, but if they walk away fully entertained, that's the secret to success.
And also, I'm looking forward to it because we have a mutual friend who also has a show on this radio station, Mark
Yes.
Liebman.
Yeah.
we get to see him not in just one part, but four. He was telling me the other day.
Well, technically, he wears many different outfits, but he is essentially just two characters in the show. Yeah.
But two characters, we'll say plus.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
but I'm really looking forward to it. The
And Mark was in it last year. He's
Right.
one of the returning. In fact, our sheriff of Nottingham and played by David Mykoff is returning. A lot of our bad guys are returning. I don't know what it says about bad guys wanting to be bad.
and your female lead is again who?
Clara Burris,
Yeah, which is
is a
great.
fantastic actress who played Marion in the Parkway production in 2011. So she's not unfamiliar with the role, but she's unfamiliar with this script. So this is a new script for her that she's getting to play.
Jeff, if people want to get more information about this show again for the next 4 weekends,
Yes.
I think I may have it also. Let me see if I have it. Or do you know the website for?
Oh, yes, yes. MontfordParkPlayers.org is their website. You can reserve chairs. They have lawn chairs, $3. It's free, by the way. It's a free show, which is
Which is
great
incredible,
because
yeah.
people are bringing all of their kids. This is not, theater's not cost effective for parents with multiple children. And theater can be an expensive thing. Montford, for years and years, have been free to the public and relied on donations. If you come and see the show, bring the whole family, bring the dog, bring a picnic, bring a bottle of wine, bring a keg of beer, whatever you want to bring. It's like,
And you got-
free for all.
And you're going to have a good time.
And you're going to have a good time. And they pass the hat at the intermission, and people drop some money in. But here, true story. Last summer, because we performed to over 600 people a night on multiple nights. Last summer, it is a fact that Montford during Robin Hood brought in more money from donations than theaters that were charging ticket prices
Wow, great.
on any given night. And that's the power of theater.
If people want to see it, we mentioned the website. What nights is it running?
Fridays,
and time?
Saturdays, and Sundays at 7:30. Highly suggest getting there by 6:30 and setting up your picnic baskets and whatnot. The actors do their warm-ups and stage combat, so you get a little behind the scenes peek at the show starting around 6:15. But parking can be a problem, and so if you can park and walk, that's ideal. But if you get there earlier, you'll have a better pick of where to sit.
And Jeff, in terms of what else you're involved in, we should mention one other thing before you head out to San Diego.
Too many things.
Right. Well, but the other thing, very, very exciting, that you mentioned your writer, and you told me off the air you'd written this other book.
Yes.
About.
I've become friends in recent years with one of my childhood heroes, a comic book artist and writer named Mike Grell, who incidentally did a poster for us for Robin Hood last summer that we sold prints for charity and raised $2,500 for local charities like Manna Food Bank and Blue Ridge Pride off of these posters. So I have become friends with this guy who I loved since I was a kid. And about a year and a half ago, I got put in touch with a guy who was writing a biographical piece about him, saying, hey, I need help on this project. You want to jump on board? So I co-wrote this book about my friend, a legendary comic book creator, Mike Grell. Book's called Life is Drawing Without an Eraser, which is a title I suggested based on something that Mike had said once upon a time. And it got nominated, much to my surprise, for an Eisner Award, which the shorthand for that is it's like the Oscars of the comic book industry. An Eisner Award at the San Diego International Comic-Con, which is the big one, the big Comic-Con. And so as a nominee in this category for book related to the comic book industry, I get to go to San Diego. I get to go to the award show with all of these other icons and celebrities, and I get to be at the biggest Comic-Con on the planet 2 weeks from now. So it's
exciting stuff.
I still can't believe it's true. It's like one of those weird things where it never occurred to me that it was possible, and then suddenly here I am.
Okay, you'll have to let us know when you win the award.
I got a 1 in 5 chance.
Okay, well, you got my vote, even though I didn't read the book.
Yes.
But you let us know, so we'll have you back on the air to talk about your trip in San Diego.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll be doing some live streaming on Facebook with
cool.
another project I have is called Issues With. We filmed seasons worth of interviews at another Comic-Con a few weeks ago with creators. It's like inside the actor studio, but with comic book creators. It's called Issues With, and there's a Facebook page for that. And I'll be following my journey in San Diego on that page. So again, Blaine, I say yes to everything, and it gets me in trouble because I have too many things going on.
Anyway, Jeff, look forward to hearing all about that. Look forward
Yes.
to seeing Robin Hood, hopefully this weekend. And as always, a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Blaine.
Speak to you soon, my friend.
It's great to be here as always. Thank
Okay,
you.
Jeff. Okay, as Jeff works his way out, I'd like, now let's get out, Jeff. I'd
Oh,
like to-
I see how it goes. We're out here. Okay. Take care, Blaine.
Okay, be well. Support for the show and WPVM is underwritten by Grail Movie House, Asheville's alternative cinema. The Grail Movie House is an independent, locally owned, three-screen cinema located in downtown Asheville. For current features, visit the Grail website at grailmoviehouse.com or the Grail's social media pages. I'd also like to mention two upcoming shows in the area, aside from Robin Hood, which you just heard about, but You Rang, Durang, two short comedies from One Wrong Mind, I love that description, is going to be at the second stage at Hendersonville Community Theater. That'll be July 5th to July 14th, and information about that is at hendersonvilletheater.org. Theater spelled, I guess, the correct way, or we'll talk about that with Abby, but re.org. In addition, the Magnetic Theater presents a comedy show that is totally ready for prime time. More Crimes and Misdemeanors. If you saw the first show in the series, you'll like this show, I'm sure. It's a modern spin on the golden age of TV comedy variety shows. That'll be July 12th, 13th, and 14th at the Magnetic Theater, and the information on that is at, I guess it's themagnetictheater.com, and it's THRE.org. I'm sorry, magnetictheater.org. It's next my pleasure to introduce our second guest of the Blaine's World Show this week, and she is Abby Felder. And welcome aboard, Abby.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Okay, Abby is co-founder of Asheville Creative Arts, and we should mention that, Abby, you can also wave to many fans and friends on Facebook.
Oh, hi.
Okay, so everybody's watching. And I've known Abby for a while, and I guess the question I always ask Abby, first when I meet a guest, so you've been in kind of a performing and theater world for a couple of years, would you say?
A couple years,
When
yeah.
did you start?
Well, I actually grew up in the Children's Theater of Charlotte, and I ended up working in Children's Theater today. I was probably in first grade or something like that. And it was just a really wonderful, formative experience to be working with all these really talented artists working in theater, most of them adults. And I think what was so important about it was that they really took seriously all of the young people who were in the space, the things that we had to say, the things that we contributed, and really encouraged us to sort of think creatively and to kind of, I guess one of the core principles of acting is that there are consequences to the things that you choose. And so being in a really safe space to explore consequences from actions that you choose with people who take you seriously and who give some weight to that was just really important and special. So I've been doing children's theater since then, and then I studied puppetry and directing in college, and sort of did some puppet and experimental theater work out of college, and then sort of started this experiment here, making work for young audiences.
Back to your Charlotte days. Do you remember your first play?
My very first play, the one that sticks out for me was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it was a wonderful piece that was directed by a very creative and talented man, Alan Poindexter, who later became the artistic director of Children's Theater of Charlotte. And he, at that time, was already working with sort of colorblind casting and with very heightened stylized movement and some wonderful creative masks that George and Sandra Gray, who are some set and costume designers in Charlotte, created. He used all of these different modes of theater making that, you think of in a more like operatic or experimental theater context, but making work for family audiences. So that one really sticks out for me.
The reason I ask that is because I have this idea that I always run by people in theater, and that is, I think it'd really be cool if we went back into your first play, you know? And I don't know if you have a videotape of that somewhere.
Oh my gosh, maybe.
But wouldn't that be cool that everybody would recreate their first play, you know? We do it at Magnetic or we do it at Exalt, wherever we do it.
Yeah.
But everybody have just these 5-minute bits, and you have to play what you played as a child, you know? And I just think that'd be a real goof to relive the memory. So it's interesting. So you then started out as a kid, and you stayed in the field. But what's interesting I find about you, so it's mostly you stayed with children's theater, almost primarily.
Yeah, and by that I mean where adult artists, adult actors are making and creating work and performing work for young audiences. And although it is oriented to young audiences, there's really something for every age level in our shows. Something for teens, something for parents. We're just trying to create a space where people can be present with one another and sort of think creatively and practice some important social tools like.
And that's what I remember being impressed with one of your productions because I saw it thinking, I think I've told you, I don't see myself as ordinarily being a fan of children's theater, but I enjoyed it. You know,
Good.
it was fun. It was interesting as an adult. And I guess that's what you're trying to do in your productions, make it for everybody.
Definitely, definitely. I think there's something about being an adult and seeing a show where young people are unabashedly and enjoying themselves that gives you as an adult permission to do the same. So that's a really unique and wonderful thing that I've observed about our audiences, our multi-generational audiences, is that as kids are experiencing something for the first time and getting really excited about it, then suddenly the adults are too.
You said something really cool, which I liked, and I guess it's the key to this, that you want, especially the performers, the actors, the kids, to be enjoying themselves and having a good time. And it reminds me of years ago, I saw a production of Oklahoma. I always remember this. And the one of the kids looked like he didn't want to be there. You know, and I don't know if his father was punishing him, the father was in the role, but he had like a miserable, expression, and he wasn't having a good time. And it was such a shame, because if you're on stage, you want people to enjoy themselves, I guess.
Definitely.
And that's, I guess, one of your roles to bring in the joy, the fun out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we really try to do as we make work is take into account that different types of stimulus sort of land on people in different ways. So we try and integrate often video or live music or movement that both the actors make and also at moments will invite the audience to participate in as well. So there's sort of a kinetic aspect too. So we're really consciously trying to have different levels of stimulus so that if people respond mostly to sound, then they have that aspect there to engage with. Or if they're primarily visual, then we'll have like puppetry or video or stylized movement. If they need to move and be engaged in that way, then there's opportunities for participation where they can, join like a rhythm sort of section or a rhythm sort of pattern that the artist will create and invite the audience to participate in. So it really is immersive and interactive in that way. So no matter how you tend to respond to storytelling or interact with storytelling, there's something kind of there for everyone.
Well, you told me also off the air that one of the things you try to do too, you break down sometimes the traditional seating, and you're not a big fan of, I guess, row by row seating. You oftentimes do stuff in the round.
Yes, yes, yes. We really want to make sure that audiences and artists are in close proximity to one another. Part of the experience that we'd like to create is something where audiences get to be present and are asked to look at people who maybe sometimes are different than them or are not similar to people they've interacted with before and see them as not just abstract characters but as human beings. And that's something that's so powerful about theater is that it creates a space for empathy because it asks you to care about people or characters, and we're just taking that one step further by putting people so close to one another that you have no choice.
Well, and something else you mentioned I think is really cool, that you want to get them involved. And I know I've done a couple of productions where just that point, we tried to get everybody singing, dancing, and it's more fun too. I think people have more fun when they are involved in it.
Definitely. A lot of traditional theater observes very strict hierarchies between actors on a stage, and there's lights that isolate them there, and there's a strict fourth wall that they don't to pretend the audience isn't there. And we really don't subscribe to that model of theater making. We really like having this acknowledgement that the audience is part of the experience too, and that their role in creating stories and observing this experience and participating in this experience is critical, and that we're trying to break down the barrier between the audience and artists.
Talk about your current, I guess, project. And it seems you're always involved in one project, working on 17 others probably at the same
Yeah.
time. But right now you're working on Charlotte's Web, is it?
We are.
And talk about, first of all, when you're working on it, is this a camp or what is it that's going to result in the final production?
Yeah, so it's not a camp. It's our summer main stage show, and we've cast a wonderful group of 5 wonderful adult artists and a musician, also an adult. We have some beautiful puppets by Edwin Salas Acosta, primarily from wood, but our Wilbur puppet has also some cloth around him. And it's going to have some live folk music that was created by a resident artist with Asheville Creative Arts, Gina Stewart and Brenda Gamble of Jones Lee, which is just really beautiful. So I'm touching on all of the elements I sort of referenced earlier. So we have puppetry, we have live music. We're going to experiment some with the seating so that, again, audiences are very close to the actors as they perform, and we'll get to maybe touch Wilbur the puppet and interact with some of the other puppets in different ways.
Are any children in this production?
There are no children in this production. Typically, I know that you saw How I Became a Pirate was a wonderful show with a delightful young person, and then following that, Click Clack Moo, we worked with Asheville Music School and had some teen artists performing the live music, which was a really awesome experience. This one does not; it's all adult actors, but nonetheless is oriented to 5 and older, and really does have some exciting stuff for all ages to sort of engage with in the storytelling.
So keep in mind also something you mentioned, that you have some musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So next time we have it come on board, we can also do live music within the
That would be
studio.
wonderful.
It'll really be fun. We'll do a couple of numbers or something on a show to explain that as well.
Yeah.
You call this production though, so a lot of people know the story of Charlotte's Web. But I think what's the word you use? Reimagined.
Yeah.
And what is that?
So basically, I mean, many people are very familiar with the story of Charlotte's Web. And so I'm very excited about it because it allows us to sort of experiment with some of the framing elements that the script has written into it. So it gives us some opportunities to think about, because I feel that in the writing of the story, E.B. White, who wrote the children's book, was very taken with nature and was very taken with the act of observing nature. So if we use this idea of observation as a starting point, then we can sort of tease that out in different ways throughout the course of the story and in the framework of the script. So we're going to see actors observing one another. We're going to ask the audience to observe the actors and to be very conscious of what that means. We're also doing a couple of residencies, one with the JCC and one with the YMCA, where our teaching artists are going to work with young people on making a lobby installation that will be some puppetry elements and some paper weavings and things where they'll get to, in that process, enact the idea of observation, and then we'll install it in the lobby. So we're really thinking about how can we pull out these moments or reorient or focus on those moments in our lives when we're asked to be still and silent and sit with nature, and what are the lessons that we can learn from that.
Who wrote the script for this?
It's by Joseph Robinette, is the gentleman who wrote the script many years ago. With I think he wrote it actually in concert with E.B. White.
And you're directing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And who's in the cast?
We have a wonderful cast. Yes. And I always get a little tripped up because there's so many T's. But Tippin.
Oh, right. Okay, great.
Is one of our cast members, and Tippin is playing Charlotte. And then Trudy Campbell, who's new to Asheville Creative Arts, but who's just wonderful. She's playing Wilbur. And then we have a woman named Anna Slate, who is going to be performing. In the script, it's ensemble. As it comes to fruition in our play, it's sort of an adult version of Fern, older version of Fern. Rebecca Bablé, who is playing Fern, young Fern. Tristan Cameron, who I believe you know.
Oh, right. Oh, he's coming back in the area.
Yep, they're coming back. Yep, and Tristan will be performing Templeton and Avery. And then we have a wonderful musician named Asher Lay who is going to be performing some live music with us. So
No, it's in rehearsal?
it's in rehearsal. Yeah, we had our first couple rehearsals last week, and it's coming together. It's very exciting.
And so when's it going to be playing?
July 18th through 28th at Magnetic Theater.
Okay, and what are the times or when can they see it?
So our public performances, meaning when the audiences are not camp groups, are going to be Friday at 7, Saturday at 4 o'clock, and Sunday at 1 o'clock. And our Saturday performances, we've started a new thing, are all pay what you wish. We're
Very
really
nice.
trying to make sure that our theater is as accessible as possible to everybody, regardless of economic needs. And so encourage everybody to come out. And then we are also doing a whole lot of camp performances that do have a few tickets open to the public on a first come, first serve basis. And those are Thursday the 18th at 1 o'clock, and then Tuesday through Friday of the next week at 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock. So audiences can call. There's a number on our website to see if there's any spots available, or just show up.
And so if people want to get more information about what you just said, best bet is to do what?
They should, yeah, check out our website, ashevillecreativearts.org. We're also on all of the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., and we'll be posting information there. But ashevillecreativearts.org and Magnetic Theater eventually will have some information about us too.
Talk a little bit about Abby then, aside from the upcoming show. Asheville Creative Arts has been in business how long?
This is our 7th season.
And this was your brainchild, I guess. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, so in the beginning of Asheville Creative Arts, it was founded with Robbie Yeager, who directed How I Became a Pirate, and also Jones Lee, who I mentioned earlier, Gina Stewart, and Brenda Gamble. And it's sort of shifted and evolved over the years. We began with very recognizable titles, like A Year with Frog and Toad, which is just a wonderful show. Miss Nelson is Missing, a lot of work that was based on popular children's titles, basically, and have evolved over the last couple years to really highlight and emphasize original works. So last summer we presented our first world premiere, which was Bugs, which was written by Gina Stewart and Brenda Gamble of Jones Lee. And then over the spring, we had another world premiere production that was sort of regionally focused about children who worked in textile mills and some of the music and art that came out around that, and looked a lot at storytelling and encouraged young people to tell stories. And that was an original production as well. And so we're hoping to continue in that vein as we move into future years.
How do you choose the work you're going to be performing or putting on?
So we have a group of resident artists who work with the organization and who act as sounding boards, and who, will say, I've been working on this project. This is how Bugs came to be, for example. Gina and Brenda said, we have this really great musical. It's about these bugs who are kind of insecure, and, they just sing about their issues and sort of are able to resolve them. So it's this beautiful metaphor about how art helps, people to sort of work through complex issues in their lives. And they're like, I've just been sitting in a drawer somewhere. I was like, well, we're going to do it. So we have this really great incubator series where we did it first as a staged reading and had different artists sort of come be part of a generative process. And then we put it on the stage last year, and it was really successful. And similarly with The Warp and the Weft, that was our spring show. It was an idea that had been sitting with me since I was a little kid, growing up in Charlotte and learning about like children who worked in Gastonia and other local textile mills really close to where I was, and how different our experiences were. So that sort of became like the genesis of that. So we have a couple of different ways, in other words. We're very connected with Children's Theater of Charlotte still, and other children's theater presenting groups in New York and Seattle. And, they'll recommend some scripts or some projects. And then, of course, our local resident artists. So sort of a myriad of different ways.
Do you ever act in any of the shows?
Oh, God. strictly behind the scenes. I grew up acting on the stage, and then quickly realized in college that my real love was being part of the bigger picture off the stage. Leave that to the and there's so many talented people here that it's really easy to allow them to take that role on.
It's funny because I'll oftentimes ask directors, do they prefer directing or acting? And almost always they do seem to prefer the directing part
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
But one of the, I guess, one of the nice side benefits is you also don't have to memorize the lines.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we spoke earlier about some of the fear and anxiety memorization can provoke.
I think so. Or to me, I think I told you off there, it was a challenge, for 5 lines. And these people are to memorize doing the whole script. So it's a whole. So when they see a show with you, it's going to be a whole full show. But it's a whole show, but it's a little shorter than a typical show. Is that correct?
Yeah, we tend to keep our shows about 1 hour. Feels like a good amount of time for especially younger audiences. And,
And older ones
And
too.
older ones too, yeah.
No, it's funny because as I get older, I prefer shorter and no intermissions. And then one of the things I thought was very sweet, I don't know if you do it on all your shows, but I think it was very important, the pirate one at least, after the show you had everybody come up and can meet the actors.
Yes.
Is that a regular thing you do?
It is, yeah. And in fact, we've expanded on that even further to, we started inviting local artists or activists or community-based organizations to come, and in addition to providing audiences a chance to meet the actors post-show, a lot of times we'll invite people in who can speak about some of the themes that we explore in the shows and their real-life application.
So, for example, in Charlotte's Web, are you doing that?
Yeah, so we're in the process of organizing our post-show talkbacks, but are interested in highlighting people working in nature preservation, and can sort of provide some context and resources for people who come to see the show and have been, asked to think about what does it mean, how do we grow and change when we interact with nature and interface with nature, and now meet an organization that has a space where you can go and do that, or is engaged in preserving nature, and so you can learn, if you're interested in that, about how to get involved with that sort of thing, so that the experience of the lessons learned in the show can extend beyond the 60 minutes.
And how cool is that? Like, very. But hopefully you keep that beyond the 60 minutes. Is that also kept short, though?
Yes.
Because I won't mention who, but it's funny. I used to love talkbacks.
Yeah.
And now I do if they're kept short.
Yeah, 15 minutes tops.
Yeah, it's perfect. I'm there. But the other day we had one, and it was like 40 minutes. And it was way too long.
Way too long.
And Abby, I guess, even with your role as director or being involved in the whole production, when people start leaving, it's a good sign that it's that time
It's
to
the
close
time.
it.
Well, especially with young audiences too, we like to give permission for everyone there to come and go as they need to. Especially younger kids sometimes just need to go use the bathroom or stretch their legs or what have you. So it's a very casual space in that regard. And before our talkbacks, we always say, if you need to leave at any moment, feel free.
Have you seen, which is probably very exciting, that kids will see a production and then become hooked on it and go into theater or want to go into theater? Do you see that happening at all?
We do, yeah. One of the really awesome things about working with some of the camp groups that we've been working with since we began is that some of their kids have come back year after year after year. And, speaking with those kids in particular who've had like now 4 or 5 years of seeing our shows under their belts, talking to them about their love of theater, or, are you excited to be back here? And they're always like, yeah. That's been a really cool experience. And yes, some of them have talked about wanting to pursue the arts. So sorry, parents.
No, but I love that. But wouldn't that be great, though, that if seeing theater gets kids motivated? Because the sad thing is, on the other extreme, you have so many teenagers, if you will, have never even seen theater,
Yeah.
never been involved. And I think once they see it, they get hooked on it
Yeah.
or want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we're very consciously thinking about and implementing is, trying to make sure that the work that we're creating is open to all diversity of experiences. And that includes making sure that the actors that are on stage look like everyone in our audience, that have a space to share experiences from a first-person perspective that expands the way we are telling stories. Because a lot of our audiences, particularly audiences of color, have mentioned like, well, I don't see my experience reflected in theater in Asheville. And so very actively addressing that, we're working with a wonderful resident artist, and our outreach director is Danielle Martin, who's founder of Yoga for Women of Color and is also a local community activist. She's been leading the charge on really making sure our space is growing and open to experiences that everyone in our audience can relate to.
What do you see down the road, what you folks are going to be involved in? So after we finish Charlotte's Web, one of the things that always amazes me about you is there's always something else. You know, like I was just speaking of a previous guest, is a little like the Jeff Messer.
Yeah,
and
the amazing Jeff Messer.
Yeah, but it runs like 10 projects at it. He was talking about 9, and then he's waiting for a 10th one. Seems you're a little bit like that, though.
Yeah.
Like your mind sort of never stops. You're always working on the next project.
Yeah. I mean, and part of that is pragmatic. The fundraising cycle is often 2 years in advance, so we have to be sort of thinking in that way. But aesthetically and philosophically speaking, we are branching out into theater for the very young. There's a wonderful theater group out of Charlotte called Play Theater. These are some artists that I grew up with at Children's Theater of Charlotte, and they're making work for ages 0 to 3. And so we are going to be collaborating with them in our next season to create or to present a wonderful show called Mi Casa, which is it's very little language in it, but the little language that there is in Spanish. And it was created with a wonderful Mexican-American artist who has this beautiful art-making truck. So it's going to involve a lot of things, moving into new audience that we haven't made work for before, which will be really exciting. And there's some really great potential there for some partnerships with community-based organizations here.
And I assume that'll also be kept shorter.
Yes.
An hour, that'll even be
Those
shorter
are
than
30 minutes. Yeah, and they're really beautiful because basically it's parents with their young children seated on the floor in very close proximity to these beautiful, gentle performances that have music, and they have different colors and puppets, and just really, really special experiences for young people, very young people and their parents.
When will that be happening?
So the hope is to have it in the spring. Usually we do a March or April.
So that'll be the spring production.
Mm-hmm.
Very exciting. So
Yeah.
and you haven't done that. And again, one of the things that you do, I think, is to your credit. You explained it the very first time you talked to me about it too. You bring in, for the most part, talented, accomplished actors who
Yeah.
performed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's something you try to get for your casts.
Yes, absolutely. And increasingly, we are calling on the very talented musical community here in Asheville. I love working with musicians because they come into a space with really active listening skills, sense of rhythm, and especially for like our improvisational or jazz musicians, like they're just ready to jam and try stuff, anything that's asked of them. So it creates a very playful and experimental and fun space to work in.
I would imagine also for the audience, it makes theater come alive as well.
That's the hope. Yeah, that's the hope, to see people being present and active with one another. It is definitely our goal to model that for audiences so that they can take that into their daily lives and be more present and actively listening to one another out in the real world.
Abby, if folks want to get more information about either your theater company or Charlotte's Web, best bet is to do what?
Go to our website, which is www.ashevillecreativearts.org.
Okay, and they'll find out information about, I guess, not only the upcoming show,
Absolutely.
but anything else. Can they also go, the upcoming show is going to be at Magnetic Theater?
That's right, Magnetic Theater in the River Arts District, and it's running from July 18th through 28th. We have some public performances, meaning tickets will be for sale at the box office for general audiences, and those are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday at 7, Saturday at 4 o'clock, and Sunday at 1 o'clock. And then our website has a list of our camp performances that have some first-come, first-served tickets available to the public.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you, Abby Felder, for being my guest this
Thank
second half hour on the
you.
BLAINESWORLD Show. Also, Jeff Messer for being my guest the first half hour. Amy Prisnash, my producer, and to Zuzu Welsh, who provided the music you heard at the beginning of the show and you'll now be hearing at the end of the show. Hope you can join us next Wednesday at 9 a.m. here in the new WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVM.org and watch on WPVM's Facebook page. Show will be rebroadcast on Saturday at 9.